Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. As Mark said, I'm Yoshi Silverstein. I use he, him pronouns. Good to see folks that I know, and I'm excited to be in this space with folks who I have not had a chance to meet and spend time with. I'm going to say just a very quick word about sort of our approach at Mitsui Collective to Jewish embodiment, and then we're going to get into framing and get into practice. For our embodied practice for today. And yeah, I'm excited to be with you all week, get to build off of some things. As Mark said, if you can't be here for every session, that's fine. It's helpful, right? They do build off each other, but they can also stand alone. So no problem if you have to miss any of them, but I hope to see you for all four. So we think about embodiment as our way of being. It's how we walk through the world or how we move through the world and what we're expressing through our actions and behaviors. We think particularly about the core values and beliefs that we are embodying, right? Or striving to embody, as it may be, because, we're all human. And so inevitably, we sometimes or even often miss the mark. And so part of our approach to embodiment is to get into practice to more fully align our the intentions that we have for our core values and beliefs, and then how do we actually bring those from intention to actuality in the ways that we are moving through the world. And like anything, we get better at that through practice. That's a little bit about how we think about embodiment. Jewish embodiment specifically is both rooted in Jewish culture, wisdom, identity, spirituality, and is an expression of those things. So I also invite us to think about what is it that we are embodying Jewishly, certainly during these sessions, but also just in our day-to-day lives. What does it look like for us to be embodied Jews, both in the sense that we are Jews with bodies, right? And also to be embodying whatever sort of the most core aspects for each of us are in terms of what does it mean to be Jewish and move through the world in a way that is sort of quintessentially Jewish. And of course, there's so many different ways to do that. There's a lot more that we've written on the website if you want to dig a little bit deeper into our thoughts around Jewish embodiment. The other thing I want to say, just in terms of framing, is in terms of embodied practice, our kind of primary focus areas, we do a lot of movement work, a lot of breath work, some stillness practice. We also bring in ritual and prayer and song, etc. We won't be doing quite as much of that in this series. We're going to be focusing mostly on the movement and breath work pieces. In general, I'm going to offer throughout the week both standing and sitting versions of what we're going to be doing, just to try to kind of hit a broad range of accessibility. You can always, send me a private message, if you have any specific needs that I'll try to address. On the spot if I can, but certainly in prep for later days. And both right now and in general, if you're able to be set up in a space where you've got, a little bit of space around you to be able to do some movement, that will be helpful. And everyone, work with whatever space you're in. We're not going to be doing anything that's going to require huge amounts of space. And don't worry, we're not doing any handstands or burpees or anything like that. We'll be doing some gentle movement practices for this week. Okay. So with that, I want to jump into the framing and practice for today. So our theme for this week is embodied Jewish resilience, renewal, and fortification for the new year. There are, I think, fill in the blank, lots of different reasons that a little bit of resilience or a lot of resilience, and fortification may be merited given sort of where we're at in the time of the season, the cold, upcoming changes on the landscape, fill in the blanks as, fits for you. And we're also in this time in the calendar, of course, we're in the middle of winter, and kind of drawing inspiration as the Hebrew calendar does in general, with aligning with like what are the energies of different seasons, right? And how do we pull that into how we sort of are connecting to our bodies, feeling the nature that's within as well as the nature without, and connect to that in different ways. And so we're gonna particularly be connecting with our nature cousins that are trees, and sort of using that as a guiding inspiration for the practices and the frameworks we're going to play with this week. So it's not quite Tu B'Shvat yet, but I think trees are not just here at Tu B'Shvat, they're with us year round. And actually, trees, I think, really demonstrate this sort of synergetic relationship with the seasonal cycles of nature in sort of very obvious ways, especially deciduous trees that lose their leaves, right, in the fall and are bare in the wintertime. And then we see the new growth in springtime and the flourishing in summer, right? Like we go through all of those things as well in our own bodies, but we don't have leaves to drop, or, we're sort of a little more subtle about it. But connecting with that seasonality can be just as helpful for us in our embodiment. So we're going to be playing with that as a way to also represent where we are in the Hebrew calendar. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it, but I did want to drop in this source sheet that I found from Safaria. This is playing with a text. Ki Adam Eitz Hasadeh, is the human like a tree of the field. There's a bunch of obviously different interpretations, as with everything in Jewish texts. But just for folks who want to spend a little time with that later, to play with some of the ideas of what are some of the ways in Jewish texts that humans are compared to trees. And again, lots of interpretations, but one of them is like, yeah, humans are like trees, and that's a Jewish thought. So we'll play with that. And the last piece of framing around trees is also with Torah, which is sometimes called, referred to as Eitz Chaim, a tree of life. And just as trees, Torah is a source of life and a source of knowledge. Trees are a source of life and knowledge. And again, for us in our bodies, how are we in our bodies a source of life? And what is the embodied knowledge that we can hold and tap into? And that's what we're going to be playing with. Okay, so with that, let's jump into today's practice. So our focus today is that we're going... Thank you. Yes, I'm getting a private message to slow down my speaking a little bit. Thank you. I have a tendency to talk a little quickly. Okay, so today's focus is the roots, right? Is rooting as a practice. Obviously, trees have and need roots. Again, we don't have literal roots that sink into the ground, but this practice of rooting is one that is very helpful for us in all sorts of different embodied practice. Rooting is also connected to the Kabbalistic mother letters, of which there are three. Specifically the mother letter Mem, which is associated with Adamah, which is the earth, right? So rooting into the earth, into the ground, that Mem is the letter in Kabbalah that is associated with rooting and with that sort of groundedness. And this is essential to embodied practice because this keeps us grounded, it keeps us connected and tethered to the earth. And it's very difficult to find balance if we're not feeling and strengthening that connection to the ground, even when we're sort of like, even if we're not as literally physically connected to the ground, can we still sense where the ground is? That's really critical for balance and connection. So with that, we're going to get into practice. Let me switch my camera over. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to show us both sitting and standing options. So if you would like to stand up, and you can stand up at some point later and or sit down later, your choice is not locked in for the entire session. If you would like to stand, now's the time, and if you would want to sit or stay seated, that's great as well. Let me on so I can see my notes. Okay. So if we are first going to start with some sort of static rooting. So if you're seated, right, you want to feel your sit bones connecting to the chair, feel your feet on the ground. If you're standing, then it's just your feet. So whichever part of you are connected to the ground or connected most directly to the things that are connected to the ground, the first thing is just to sense into, right, feel that sense of connection, bring your awareness into your feet, your sit bones, you're sitting, right, feeling, oh, the earth is actually pulling me down, right, and keeping me connected and holding me up, right, pulling me down and holding me up at the same time. Let me actually just bring my attention to that feeling of gravity doing its thing and feeling that sense of rooting in. And as I'm sensing that, as I'm feeling that, maybe I can even deepen that a little bit more, maybe sort of relax a little bit in the body so that I can feel even a deeper sense of rootedness, right? If I'm standing, give a little bit of bend to the knees, right? Feeling that sense of being relaxed and held up by the ground, not collapsing, right? Relaxation is not the same thing as collapse. but a softening so I can really feel that sense of connection to the ground. So this is sort of that basic first step of feeling rootedness, right? We're feeling connection to the ground, feeling that sense of like, if I actually had roots, they would be spreading down and around into the ground. All right, so from here, now we're going to start to play with this because it's good to be rooted in stillness, and we want to maintain that sense of rootedness even while we are in movement. And this is both literally moving and also metaphorically moving. Keep the actuality and the metaphor are going to be true for everything we're doing. We're practicing sort of in a very physical way, and also in the ways we're metaphorically, when we're in movement metaphorically. So if I'm standing, I'm going to start to now shift my balance back and forth and feeling again that sense of rootedness. From seated, same thing. I'm shifting sort of from one sit bone and one foot to the other. And in each of these positions, we don't have to go fast. I'm sensing, what does it feel like to feel my weight shift and then be balanced mostly on one side and feel that sense of rootedness here. Shift it over to the other side, feel that rootedness there. And whether sitting or standing, if it feels good, pick up a foot so that all your weight is on whichever side. Set it down gently, slowly, smoothly shift that weight, pick it up. If you're not comfortable picking the foot up all the way, then just shift as much weight onto one side as feels good, right? Maybe you've got just like that foot lightly, maybe you've just got it on the tiptoe, right? Trying to find, okay, what do I need to keep a sense of balance, but also have this shifting of the weight. As I'm shifting this weight here, also noticing like, okay, how do I use my skeleton, the structure of the body, just like a tree uses the trunk, right? To dig in, to feel connected to the roots. If I'm picking up a foot, I'm also feeling, oh, that my hips are aligned on top of my knees, on top of my ankles, right? Whereas if they're soft here, that becomes much harder to, right? To find that balance. Whereas if they're strong and aligned over it, I can feel that much more easily. All right. So we've got this shifting weight again, feeling as we're moving, this rootedness. And from the chair here. All right. And now we're going to bring in a little bit of direction change. Because in life, sometimes we're just sort of going back and forth, right? But often we want to actually change directions and, be agile and move in lots of different directions. So let me show you from the seated first, and then I'll show you the walking version. So here, I'll start on my right side. Got most of my weight here on the right side, right? Feeling it on my right sit bone, feeling my right foot on the ground. Now I'm going to pick up my toes, so I'm pivoting on the heel, shifting it this way, the heel of my left foot, and shifting here. I'm going to kind of play with this like 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to shift it here and over. This is one of those things that is fairly simple, right? We're just shifting from this direction and my weight and balance to this direction. But I'm wanting to do it in a way that is intentional, smooth, where I'm really feeling the balance shifting. From the standing position, it's the same thing. If I'm starting here, sort of at this 45-degree angle on the right side, I'm going to slowly shift my weight so that here actually now most of my weight's on this side, and it's light enough that I can shift and here and take a step this way. And then I'm going to sink it back and this way. For anyone who practices Tai Chi, where this is very similar to Tai Chi walking or shifting, where I'm shifting the weight so that I can pivot, and I'm shifting it to the right, and back. And if you have enough space and if you're standing, you can start to actually walk around. And again, what we're trying to play with here is continuing to feel that sense of rootedness as I am moving. Right? It's one thing to stay rooted when I'm perfectly still. It's another thing to stay rooted as I am moving. Okay, so we've got that sort of static rooting, either standing or sitting, where we're feeling, okay, I'm rooted, I'm feeling gravity holding me up and pulling me down, right? We've got a little bit of this shifting weight that we've played with, back and forth, and then a little bit of this, okay, if I'm like rooted, staying rooted as I change directions and actually am walking around. Gonna do add one more layer of movement with rootedness to sort of continue to integrate some things. And then we're gonna do a final, we're gonna do a little bit of sort of improvisation, which we like to weave in when we can. So you just get to play with it a little bit. And then we'll finish with a couple of minutes of some breath work and stillness. So you have a sense of where we're going for the next few minutes. Okay, so again, rootedness, static, shifting the weight and the balance, direction change. Okay, so I want to add one more layer, which is how do we feel this sort of sense of full body connection where I'm feeling the rootedness through my feet, through my toes, etc., all the way out to my fingertips. Yeah? Okay, so if you watch closely, this I'm gonna move my arm without a strong connection, without any particular feeling of rootedness, and then I'm gonna move my arms with rootedness, and actually just see if you can see the difference. I don't know how well you'll be able to, but let's just try it, okay? So here I'm moving my arms, just random patterns, and I'm not particularly feeling rooted. Not completely unrooted, but right, I'm not. Now, see if you can see the difference. Still making these random patterns, but I'm trying to do it in a way that feels rooted in the ground. So you may, I don't know how well you can see the difference, but now try and play with it. I see some of you already started, so great. Try playing like just where there's no sense of connection between your arms. Basically, like your arms, if they end at the shoulders, there's no other connection to the rest of your body, right? If you're just moving your arms totally in isolation from the shoulders down. Yeah? And from seated, it looks like this. Now, right, move your arms in a way that they are connected to every other part of the body, where there's no way, you cannot move your arms without it influencing the rest of the body in some way. You're noticing that difference, right, from standing. And so to help sort of sink that difference in, feel if we go, this is kind of like John Travolta, like a little disco, right? So if you've got like your left pinky toe and your right pointer finger, if I can feel like those are influencing each other, they're like entangled, so to speak, we will quantum speak in, right? This, and then shifting sides, this is how we sort of bring that sense of rootedness even to our like farthest points out from the ground. And so if we're practicing that, this, by the way, for folks who like some of the anatomy and whatnot, this is primarily this sense of connection from one part of the body to another part that's really distant is primarily moves through the fascia, right? So for folks if that's helpful to think about, right? How is that whole, like your fascia from the tips of your toes, that sort of sleeve of connective tissue all the way out? That's what really helps us to feel that sense that every part of the body is connected. And so when I move one part, it influences the other in some way, right? It's all connected as opposed to this, which is totally isolated. That making sense? Okay, so get into our last few minutes. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna share my computer sound. One moment. Okay, I am going to play some music. This is music from Bhatti Levine's new album, All the Leaves, very, appropriate for our theme. I'm gonna play this for like, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes or so. Um, and what I want to invite us to do is just to improvise, right? For folks who have a camera on, I love like keeping the camera on. Don't worry, nobody's judging you, right? We're all just like in it together. And if you want to keep your camera off, that's fine too. But we're improvising. This again can be seated or standing. If you're seated, then we're just doing this. I mean, it's really move however you want. You're standing, moving however you want, feeling, the rhythm, the beat of the music, but the primary thing we're working on is feeling that sense of rootedness and connection through the whole body. Whatever I'm doing, I'm feeling connected to the ground in my movement. And the music just sort of helps give us something to respond to. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to move into a very brief breathwork stillness to close. So here we go.
All the leaves have fallen down.
And again, total
Fallen
improvisation. Just move
down.
however feels good. Feeling that sense of
All
rootedness and
the
connection, however you're moving.
leaves have fallen
Sit.
down. Have fallen down. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and
With
wind.
shifting the balance and
Return
the weight,
again.
changing directions.
All the leaves have fallen down, have fallen down.
Going for about 30 more seconds. Keep playing with it.
All the leaves have fallen down, have fallen down. I am the water, earth, fire,
And start to bring yourself to a close. You're standing. Come back to a seated position. And to close our practice, this will just be for about 20 seconds or so. Want to bring back that mother letter mem, which makes the hum sound, as a way to really sort of feel that connection to Adama, to the earth, to our bellies, and to the ground. So in a comfortable position, seated, and close your eyes if it feels good. I want to invite us to take maybe 3 deep breaths, and on the exhale to put, bring the lips together and make that hum sound. So on the exhale, it'll be mm. And of course, you're all muted, so you'll just hear yourselves, but 3 of those nice deep inhales and a hum on the exhale. That will bring today's practice to a close. I will share, yes, the name of the artist and album. See a couple of requests. I'll share those in just a moment. And before I turn it back over to Mark, I'll say really quickly, Excited. Hopefully, it's felt short to me. Hopefully, it felt, short to you in the good way. I'm excited to be with you all for the rest of the week. I'll share more info later on the week and links and whatnot, but just wanted to kind of tease right now, especially for folks who might not be able to make it later in the week. We are opening our online studio later this month, which is sort of our online practice space to be in embodied practice together. Next week on Thursday, we're doing a free intro class, an intro to Mitsui method that'll sort of cover more of the foundations and basics of our approach. And then studio sessions starting on Thursday, January 23rd. We'll share links to all of that later in the week, but you can go to our website. And if you're not on our mailing list, sign up for that to make sure you get all of the announcements. And with that, I'll say thank you so much. I'll be on for any of the Q&A that follows, but Mark, back to you.
Thank you so much, Yoshi. That was just wonderful. And yes, it went very quickly for me, which I think is a good thing. A lot of appreciation in the chat. We close the practice as we do each day. Those of you who are observing a yard site or in morning, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, please feel free to do so. Thanks to Rachel sharing the words on the screen. Rachel, maybe you can make it a little bit bigger. That'd be great. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, we invite you to please stay present for a few moments to support those who are. And if you're reciting Kaddish, please join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalmad, Yibrach, Yibate, Yamrichu, Yimute, Chayechon, Yamechon, Haye, Dechol, Beit Yisrael, Agalah, Bisman, Karib, Emru, Amen. Hey, Shmei, Rabba, Mevarach, Ve'olam V'olamei, Amayah. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, Yithadar, Yitalev, Yithalal, Shmei, D'Kudsha, Shrichu. La'ela, Mikol Birchata V'Shirata, Tushbachata V'Nechamata, V'Nefan, Imru, Yehesh Lama Rabba Min Shemaya, Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, Imru, Amen. Yiseh Shalom Bimrama, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, V'Al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'Imru, Amen. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I want to thank Meg Seufer again for sponsoring our practice and honoring Cantor Lizzie Shamash for her beautiful teaching over the years in our yoga studio. And it was, I think, really bashert to have that dedication today to honor Lizzie, who represents and teaches our embodied practice for IJS so beautifully with this series that you're leading, Yoshi. Wow, that went really fast. And I think that's our first daily sit dance party that I can remember. Maybe people will correct me, but that was really, I switched to gallery view and it was really just beautiful to see. I have a lot of questions. I want to invite people to share both your reflections with your experience, but also if you have a question you'd like to ask Yoshi, please put it in the chat. Preface it by writing question all in caps, and I'll keep an eye out and try to work your question into the conversation. I think I just want to start, Yoshi, by asking you about the origins of your interest in the embodied aspect of Jewish spiritual practice, because, of course, I have quoted the line before, I think it's from Dubliners, about living a short distance from our bodies. And so much of postmodern Jewish life has been dominated by the mind and the intellect and very disconnected from anything below the neck. And IJS, has also been very involved in trying to recover and lift up the body as an important aspect of Jewish spiritual practice. So maybe you just tell us a little bit about, how that evolved, how that showed up for you, how that evolved for you to begin with.
I mean, we have 2 hours, right? No.
Yeah. We have a couple of days, so it's great.
We do have more days at least, yeah, so we can pick it up. I mean, I think personally for me, both in specifically Jewish ways and in other ways, I think embodiment has been part of my life since, I was very, very young. I grew up in Spokane, Washington. I went to a Montessori preschool that was housed in an arboretum. So recess was like, go play in the trees, children. And I started playing music at a young age and doing martial arts, skiing, hike camping in nature, etc. So I think all of those things that I was into from very early on had this thread of embodiment really woven throughout. Obviously, didn't use that language when I was little. And then
Mhm.
as I sort of began connecting more and more with my Jewish identity and sort of creative expression, I think that was also an area where the ways that I felt most tapped into a sense of Jewish connection and spirituality and creativity was through embodied practice.
Mhm.
Music was a really big part of that for me, especially in high school and also in college. Um, and then the first really 15 years of my career were in the Jewish nature education world. So I really was exploring that part of things. And I think what brought me then really particularly into embodiment as we are thinking about it in our work Mitsui Collective was um, I think I mean, there's multiple things, but I think one was, I think Judaism has been a very embodied religion and way of being since the very start. And like you said, there's ways we've sort of maybe moved away from the emphasis over the millennia, but
Mhm.
if we looked at Torah, I mean, there's so much in our stories and narratives about
Mhm.
connection to the land, connection to ourselves, each other, right? I think you could also say that all of halacha, of traditional mitzvot of a traditional religiously observant life is about embodying Judaism, right? And so
Mhm.
for folks, then so for a lot of people that speaks that very much resonates, and for a lot of people that doesn't resonate, right? And so I think it's both sort of elevating how is that embodied to be practicing mitzvot for folks that that is very resonant, and for
Right.
folks looking for something else, saying, okay, I think what that gets right is it's a very systematized approach. It gives us
Mhm.
a framework to really plug into in terms of our practice, which is really helpful. And I think there can be multiple sort of like halachot, multiple like pathways that we can walk that allow us to bring our Jewish values and identity, et cetera, into like how do we actually practice that on a day-to-day basis? I think
Yeah.
that's key. Yeah.
Well, that's a good encapsulation. I'd love to dig in more, and maybe we will as the week goes by. I am thinking there are two things that came up for me. One, and it came up, someone mentioned in the chat earlier, in terms of trees, about really using trees as the metaphor. Um, uh, in terms of aspects of Jewish practice that emphasize the body, and Kabbalah and the Kabbalistic tree of life, all is one such thing. Like we have done a lot of that in the daily sit, where people have referred to the different sphirot, different aspects which correlate to different parts of the body, right? So just start. So that's one area where I thought people might recognize this idea that it's all connected. That there are these distinctive aspects of our bodies um, that really cannot operate in isolation from each other, which you taught so beautifully today. That was a great practice. The arm thing, that was really amazing, I thought, and
Yeah.
staying rooted while moving also was, that was that alone worth the price of admission right there. So, but the tree of life, I wonder if how much of that you work into the work, what you offer. You teach it through the Mitsui, and the other part that I think people might be familiar with is the Birchot Hashachar, the morning blessing practice, which is very much about, which is rooted, no
Yeah.
pun intended, in the
Yeah.
Talmud, about what happens with our bodies when we get up, when we wake up in the morning, and get up out of bed. So those are I just wanted to see, how you play with those, if at all.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, both in terms of like I said, prior work that I've done with nature education. I also I got my master's degree in landscape architecture. So, the natural world, ecology, I think,
Hmm.
are often just sort of sources of inspiration for me personally and in our work as they are for so much of Jewish learning and practice.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, a couple other, and we might, depending on the rest, what happens the rest of the week. There's some other ways we bring, like one of my favorite breath work practices that we do, we call soil to sky breathing, which is it's a breathing practice, but it's again really connecting with sort of that sense of feeling into our tree-like nature and sort of connecting to both earth and sky,
Hmm.
and sort of feeling through breath the flow of air, of nutrients, resources, so we might play with that later in the week. But I do think I think trees to me also represent just this balance um of self-love and continuous growth,
Hmm.
like a growth mindset. I think
Hmm.
so I think that it's that sort of that balance of like self-love of like trying to, and this is an ongoing practice, but trying to love ourselves unconditionally, right? Like
Right.
saying, I have love for myself no matter what. There's no conditions on it for exactly who I am and who I have been and who I will be, right? Like that. And there's like a way in which that can a version of that could be sort of like, when it's out of balance, could be like, oh, I'm perfect the way I am, and therefore I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to like continue to try to grow and learn and all of that, and so, which would be sort of, I don't know, this like kind of passive, something. So I think having that growth mindset is also, and so I think trees, it's like, I mean, I don't know what trees think about, but like, trees look all sorts of different ways, even within a species, let alone from one species to another, right? And it's
Hmm.
like there's
Hmm.
trees that are like pointy and whatever, and there's trees that are really weird and gnarly. And like, so like my at least story that I tell myself about the trees is they're all like they all love them. So like, yeah, I'm a gnarly tree here, I love it. I'm a pointy tall tree. You're like, right, like a tree doesn't worry about how
Yeah,
it what
don't look at my knot.
yeah, it's like, yeah, I like that actually, and actually, like the way we look at trees is like often that's where we see a character, is like in the
Hmm.
knots, in the weird shapes, and in the whatever. So,
Hmm.
but then the tree is constantly growing as well and responding
Yeah.
to its environment and all of that. So to me, it's sort of like, okay, how do we sort of in ourselves find that balance of like, great, I am both perfect how I am, and also part of that is also saying, and I'm going to continue growing and learning, I hope, the rest of my life. And that's also beautiful. And so, how do I do both of those things? And so, yeah, trees sort of provide that inspiration for me personally.
Yeah, that's great. I want to talk more about trees too, but you said something that in the couple of minutes we have left, I think I'd like to address also. I saw at least one person in the chat who said, "Oh, I was resistant at first." First of all, this is different than what we
Yeah,
quote
yeah,
normally do, right? We usually sit in meditation, and this, was kind of an embodied mindfulness practice.
yeah,
This
yeah,
was a embodied mindfulness practice, which is a little different. We do it sometimes, but not always.
yeah,
And there was some resistance. So I wonder if you could address the resistance, and the person said, I was resistant at first and then it was wonderful. And
yeah,
I'll add mine. I was probably also a little resistant at first too. And it makes me think about like, what's that about? Like, why is it self-consciousness or whatever? Like, so maybe, you kind of address it by saying part of this practice is kind of this almost like radical self-acceptance, right? Of our bodies.
yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of it, but if you maybe want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, I share in that. Like, I literally founded an organization like based on embodiment, and I te like, and like there are times when I'm in like some other learning session that I'm just like a participant in, and they're
Right.
like, now we're gonna do some movement, and sometimes I feel I'm like, ah, like, and I think that there's just like, um. I mean, our human bodies, as amazing as they are, they're also like fundamentally kind of lazy. Like, so like the law of inertia applies to our human bodies as well. And so like our bodies like to basically, if we're just kind of sitting around, our bodies kind of want to just sit around and conserve energy. But the
Hmm.
opposite's true too, which is like once some momentum is going, then that starts to build on itself as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite movement authors, Katie Bowman, who's a biomechanist, and writes and shares all sorts of movement stuff. She was talking about this, like, how do I get my kids like walking more? And she has this like kind of like the 7 minute rule where she's like, okay, let's just go for a 7 minute walk. Sometimes it's just a 7 minute walk because maybe it's a day where I don't know, whatever. It's like actually that was right amount of time. And she's like, most of the time, once we hit 7 minutes, the momentum is shifted and we can actually keep going for a lot longer. Um, so I think like again, the laws of inertia, once
Mm-hmm.
our bodies, so we have some resistance because we're going from not moving to moving, and that
Mm-hmm.
just requires a shift, a transition. And once we start to move and the momentum, like it's actually like often that picks up a bit of its own energy and then it feels good to just stay with it, right? And ride
Yeah.
it through. But yeah, there's absolutely that little bit of
That's great.
resistance.
Thank you for sharing that, and thanks for sharing, your own, no, your honesty around that.
Yeah.
Um, we're at time, so I'm sorry that we have to end here because I have many more questions, and it's really so interesting to think about a lot of these things. But I want to just end with some appreciation, Yoshi. See a lot of appreciation in the chat. Resistance or no resistance from people who really, really appreciate it. Looking forward to the rest of the week. And thank you so much for offering this and lots of success to Mitsui and to the new studio that you're
Thank
opening up, which is really, really great. So we'll all stay tuned to get more details on that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks to Rachel for holding our space today, and thanks to Meg for sponsoring us today. And hope to see everyone tomorrow for part two of our series
Much.
with Yoshi. Take care, everyone. Many blessings.
We're going to keep the Zoom room open for about 30 seconds to allow folks to save the chat. As a reminder, you can click on the three buttons up in the corner of the chat and then click Save Chat.
Great. And Yoshi, you shared the link to Bhatya's album, right? Okay. Yeah, that was great too. Okay, everyone.